Hey, I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for joining me here on NewsNation. If you've been watching our coverage, I have a completely different take than what you've just been hearing. I bring you good news. I have two pieces of affirmation that this election does not have to be a battle to the bottom of which side scares people more. And these are not feelings. They are facts. First, people who don't usually make their witness are indicating this time may be different. By making their witness, I'm giving you a metaphor for what? Voting, exercising the franchise. Polls. Polls we're shy on, good, because they only tell us who people say in a given moment they may vote for, right? That's why the only poll that really matters is when? On Election Day. However, the number of people who take action on intentions, what does that mean? Those who register to vote and where they're doing it and who they are, these are stronger indicators. Listen to this. A recent analysis found the week Biden dropped out of the race. Now, I break it like that because I want you to focus on that part. The week he dropped out of the race. And remember that week. We were told, this is it, he's out, he's out, he's out. It's going to be Harris. They can't overlook a sitting VP, let alone a black female, not in the Democratic Party. What happens that week? A huge surge of voter registration. How huge? You're not going to believe the numbers. But just as important, who? Compared to the same time in 2020, 13 states, including battlegrounds of Michigan and North Carolina, young black women up 176%. Young Latina registration, 150%. 176, that's almost 3 times. Voter registration among all black women, up almost 100%. That means double. Among black Americans, up 86%. Among young women in general, regardless of race, 84%. These are all obviously overperforming. Raises the question. Well, 2 questions. Why that week? Like I said, the suggestion is that Biden was blunting enthusiasm of the people in those demographics, in those places. And when word came down of his stepping down, you saw what I just showed you. The second point is a sign that the majority of us, specifically people like you and me, all right, drawn to NewsNation, getting past left and right and back to reasonable. The good news, we are not part of the problem of division. The political division is largely manufactured and largely representative of the fringes, not us, not the majority. Proof of concept? Good. Always ask for proof, okay? The fastest growing part of the electorate, as I've told you many times, now a plurality, not a majority, but a plurality, 43% declaring themselves as independent of the parties, okay? And within that, we see a schism, okay? Those who want to be in parties, those who don't. And the schism presents us with a paradox, and here it is. 81% of us feel more divided than united. That's sad. But nearly 7 in 10 of us think Americans want the same things in life. How can those two things be true? Because while we all, 81%, see what's being put on us by the political game, relentless division as a byproduct of constant negative messaging about the other side, we all see it, we all feel it, that gets you the 81%. But we also know the deeper truth, that there is much more that connects us in America than that which divides us, no matter how hard they try to emphasize the division. We see how this happens. During elections, candidates, parties, what do? They hone in on issues that don't necessarily reflect our most urgent concerns. They pick issues that separate them from their opponents. Hence the culture wars, hence dueling investigations of which party's players are worse. These efforts pay off, but mostly with the most ardent partisans, the fringe. And this must be the case because we see in the same data that outside the edgy edges, the rest of us are mostly 50-50 propositions on issues, and I'll explain why that is. Let's look at the for instances in the data. Gun ownership does more to increase safety in the United States. Harris supporters, no way. Trump supporters, all day. The rest of us, all of us taken together, 50-50. Why? I'll explain in a second. The criminal justice system isn't tough enough on criminals. Harris supporters, not even 40%. Trump supporters, over 80. All of us, 61, right? More so than not, but, right, still kind of equivocal. America's openness to people from all over the world is essential to whom we are as a nation. Harris, 88%. Trump, no way, 34%. All of us, 6 out of 10. White people benefit from advantages black people do not have. Harris supporters, 82. Trump supporters, 18. It's a shocker to me. I didn't think it would be that deep. All voters, 50-50. Now, why? Why does it seem that taken as a whole, we're 50-50? We don't know our minds? No, the opposite is that it all matters to critical thinkers like you. This is no litmus test. You can't just give me a snap judgment. You gotta know how. Why? Give me context. What kinds of Second Amendment application? What kinds of roles in the world? What kinds of advantages are we talking about? What would we do about it? That's critical thinking. And that's why, in the main, we are open, 50-50 propositions. As much as the players and the parties want us to see each other as the enemy, more of us agree than disagree on what matters. For instance, people having access to IVF is a good thing. That's the proposition. Harris, 84. Trump, 65. All voters, 73. We agree, and that's a big thing because it is a reproductive right extension question. I wouldn't have asked it this way, but that's what Pew Research did. Do reproductive rights matter? You're going to see big numbers when you blend us all together. Why? Because on the whole, we know that you don't take a right from a class of people, let alone 52% of the population. A strong U.S. military makes the world more safe. Harris supporters, 68. Trump, 83. All of us, 75. Consensus. It's extremely, very important the U.S. takes active role in world affairs. Harris, 71. Trump, 53. All of us, 60. But then there's one last point, and this one hurts me to say. I wish it weren't true, but maybe it needs to be. Maybe it needs to be. And I can't blame this on MAGA or radical fringe political minorities. There is an overwhelming reality that all of us feel in this country. And here's the proposition. The country can't solve many important problems. Over 50% of Harris supporters, over 50% of Trump supporters, and over 50% of us overall. And that is a reality, and it is shameful. For us to not believe that government is trying to work on solutions is a sad reality, and you know why? It's true. There is zero hype in that. They have lost our confidence. So let's talk to somebody who is absolutely going to be a player in the next administration, no matter who wins. Congressman Jim Jordan, House Judiciary Chair, subpoenaed the company that employs the daughter of the judge in Trump's hush money case. The company is a Democratic marketing firm that has worked for Biden and Harris. This is an extension of the political argument that the judge was against Trump because of what his daughter does. Jordan alleges there's a clear financial conflict of interest by the judge because of his daughter's work. That is a very rare test. But instead of talking about him, why don't we talk to him? Congressman Jordan joins us now. It's good to see you, sir.
Chris. Yeah, good to be with you. An interesting monologue. I think a good monologue. You know, it's a great country, and I do wish we could come together on more things. But I thought that was good. It made me. I was thinking as you were talking, so that's probably what you wanted from your audience. So even though I guess I'm a guest, I was being an audience member right there.
Well, Jim, first of all, you're always welcome to have the conversation. And the only thing I can guarantee you is we're going to disagree, but when we do, it's going to be with decency. I'm not going to come at you because I want people to get the benefit
I always
of the conversation. And it's always been that way. Now, how depressing is it to you that most people in your family don't believe that government can get it done for us on the things that matter most?
Well, I mean, I think that's just because we see the track record. Big government has a way of messing things up, not doing things right. That's why our country and our Constitution is about empowering the individual, empowering freedom and economic liberty and those sort of things. But yeah, I think that's kind of normal. Whatever side you happen to be on is people take a look at Washington. They're like, what's going on in that crazy town? So it'd be nice if we could come together and work on some. There were some issues where we did that. Even this Congress, which seems so divided. There was the issue on requiring a warrant before we could, in the Pfizer reauthorization, before the government can search what I call the giant haystack of information. Jerry Nadler and I were on the same page, and that rarely happens. But when it came to privacy rights, individual liberty, we were on the same page. And so, unfortunately, we lost that vote 212 to 212 in the House. But those are the kind of things where we can come together and hopefully get something done that the country agrees with, and that makes sense. And it's consistent with our Constitution.
And you guys did the infrastructure bill, which obviously has benefited red and blue all over the country. But I take your perspective, or as my therapist likes to say, well, that is one perspective, which always lets me know that he thinks I said something wrong. The other way to look at it is that you guys get rewarded for opposition more than for cooperation, and that it is in your interest to fight against the Democrats more than it is to work with them.
Yeah, but that's not my motivation. For example, we got a letter from Mark Zuckerberg 2 days ago. My motivation is not try to win or lose here. My motivation is protecting the First Amendment, protecting your right to speak, my right to speak, our right to have a robust debate, not have government try to work against you, work with big tech to censor certain points of view. If we don't have a robust First Amendment, the alternative to settling disputes is not pretty, and we never want to go there. So let's make sure we have a robust First Amendment. So my motivation is not about winning in political points there. It's about getting the facts so that we can protect the First Amendment. Same with the subpoena we sent to Authentic Campaigns, the company that Judge Merchan's daughter runs or is the president of. We think there's important information there. We're in an unprecedented time where you have a state prosecutor going after the former president of the United States, the nominee for president of one of the major political parties, in the midst of a campaign, for goodness sake. And all kinds of people, smart legal minds, say that this judge has a conflict of interest, but he didn't recuse himself, and he made all kinds of decisions that people have concerns about. So we just want to know. We want the information. We wrote them twice. We went through a long process. Finally, we had to resort to a subpoena because they won't give us any information.
But Jim, it just reeks of politics. You could do the same thing with Judge Cannon, who was asked to recuse herself because of what another judge knew about her politics. You'd be doing it with Justice Alito. You'd be doing it with Justice Thomas. Everybody's got somebody in their family who's got a strong political view, but you're picking a Democrat because you want to help Trump. And I think people see that, and it reduces their confidence in you to do the job.
Well, there's a little difference here. Authentic Campaigns made $9 million. That's just what we know from public records. There was 1 month alone where that company that Judge Merchan's daughter runs got $2 million from the Biden-Harris campaign. When Harris was running for president in 2019, they made $7 million according to public records. So there's 9 million reasons why that's a little different than the situations you just described. And then you have the decisions this judge made in the course of this trial, where Brad Smith, the expert on campaign finance, wasn't even allowed to testify? You got to be kidding me. We brought Brad Smith in and let him tell Congress what he wasn't allowed to tell the court. But look, that's why we're focused here. Plus, we've introduced legislation that's actually passed the committee that says if a state prosecutor goes after someone running for president, the candidate can move that to federal court, change a venue. So we're doing this because we got real legislation we're working on, and we want to get the facts, do our oversight, which is part of our constitutional duty, so we have the best information for evaluating whether we make that change in the law.
I'm okay with the removal of venue. That makes sense. But I still see the political expediency. You want to go after people who benefit based on politics. Ivanka Trump got patents from China while she was a government official. That's unheard of. Trump had money coming in all kinds of ways. He didn't completely divest. Now, let me stop myself, and here's why, Jim. I really don't care about any of this. If you want to get into the mud game, everybody is dirty. I think the focus should be on how to make things better. And this isn't your problem, what I'm going to address now, but it really bothers me, and I'm hoping it bothers you too. I care if people are messing with ballots and ballot harvesting. No question about it, okay? Got to police it. What Paxton just did in Texas reeks. He didn't come up with any proof. He's banging on the doors of 80-year-old ladies months in front of an election with ballot harvesting. It reeks of politics. How do you see this as being legitimate? Not your problem, not your state. You didn't do it. But he's a Republican.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'd have to get all the facts there, but I think Attorney General Paxton's a good man and does a good job. I don't know the specifics of what's going on with this particular matter. What I do know is we've passed legislation in the House of Representatives which says non-citizens shouldn't be allowed to participate in our elections, and there should be proof of citizenship before you go in the voter registration roll in your respective state. But the Democrats were against it, and Chuck Schumer won't bring the legislation up. I hope we try to put that legislation on the spending bill that funds the government when we get back in September.
Why don't you?
But the idea that
why don't you offer him this, Jim? Offer him this. Because, look, I get the policy arguments. By the way, they're not great politically. I think I lose the debate 8 out of 10 times by saying people who don't have government ID tend to be of lower socioeconomic levels, and it's a disincentive for them. And now you're going to chill that group of voters who tend to be Democratic. But I get why people want identification. Why don't you guys allow what you always say no to, which is motor voter? When people register to get their license, make it a federal law that every state has to allow them to register to vote. So at least you're giving a chance to people to sign up both ways.
Well, when they do that, Chris, if they also demonstrate that they're a citizen, who would be against that? But that's not what happens. They go to the motor voter law and they get the driver's license and they just attest. They just say they're a citizen. Shazam! They go on the voter registration roll.
You gotta be a citizen.
And then in some of the states,
you gotta
they
be
have
a
ballot
citizen.
harvesting and they mail out. Okay, well, as long as they're citizens, then okay. I don't see a problem with what you just described. But that's not what our bill is about. Our bill is proving you're a citizen. You should not be on voter registration rolls.
I got you. But here's the problem with your bill.
You're a citizen of this country.
Here's the problem with the bill. You're going to wind up catching more legal U.S. citizens who don't have an ID for other reasons than you are illegal entrants who are trying to vote. Every time they look at this, they make almost no cases of any widespread or significant, statistically, people who are not here legally who are trying to vote. It's a boogeyman, Jim.
Well, maybe you would have an argument, but for this simple fact. In 3 years and 8 months, 10 million migrants have come into this country under the Biden-Harris administration. 10 million. And we're now in an environment where many states just flood. They just mail out ballots to people on the rolls. So that is the problem. Maybe your argument, maybe all that makes sense in a different context, but that's not where we are today. 10 million, on pace to get to 12 million. And I always underscore this, Chris. 12 million is equivalent to the entire population of the state I'm from, the great state of Ohio. We're the 7th largest state in the union.
I get it.
That is a huge number. That is a huge number. So that's why this legislation makes sense.
Brother, I'm with you.
We need to put it on.
It is a mess.
We need to get that passed, and Chuck Schumer needs to bring it up. There was a handful of, by the way, back to your bipartisan monologue, there was a handful of Democrats who actually supported that, but the vast majority did it.
And you had one of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate that had a bill that would pass the Senate, and Trump and co. didn't want it to get any consideration in the House. That would have helped at the border also. My only point is, you have too many people coming into this country illegally, and it's gotten worse on Biden's watch. Shame on them, frankly. It's more than politics, and they have to deal with that. Fair issue. But. The problem isn't that they're voters. I don't buy the great replacement theory. Two things can be true at once, okay? You got to stop illegal migration. And we got to do a lot better.
I just want citizens vote.
But it's...
Right.
I know, but I'm saying we don't have a big problem with non-citizens voting. I think it's a little bit of a boogeyman, but the concern about who's coming in, I'm with you all day, and you're always welcome here to make the case for what matters, Jim Jordan. I appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. Good to be with you.
All right, we'll do it again. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. I keep telling you guys, we're different, okay? We're not going to agree on a lot of things. I'm not going to yell at the guy. I'm not going to disparage him personally. I'm not going to disparage his office, because those are all cheap, histrionic tricks to distract you from focusing to what we're talking about. There's definite disagreement. There's pushback. But we could just as easily be going to dinner. It's because we're not enemies. Earlier this week, we brought you the story of Hispanic Democrats. And look, it's not Jordan's problem. He doesn't control Texas. But I got to tell you, this smells bad, if only the timing. Okay? Ballot harvesting is a concern. But you better show proof if you're knocking on grandma's doors with guns, right? The same stuff you were so worried about happening at Mar-a-Lago that didn't happen there is happening with 87-year-old grandmothers because of the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, accusing them of ballot harvesting months out from the election when there's no voting going on. I have an 87-year-old great-grandmother. She got knocked and saw the bang-bangs. Why? She joins us next.
They started searching all my house, my storeroom, my garage, my kitchen, everything. And we're supposed to live in the greatest country in the world. This is a free country. This is not Russia.
Up my phone. Wait, what happened in Texas? Good. I'm glad you're interested, because I'm doing another block on it. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, okay? He has an election integrity unit. Good, but it depends what you do with it, right? A series of pre-dawn raids last week, okay? We're in August, okay? There's what voting, you know what I'm saying? So what is he doing? Well, who's he targeting? Elderly Latino Democratic volunteers and multiple Democratic politicians. Why? Because they have allegations, and they say they have proof that there may have been a scheme to ballot harvest. What does that mean? People who go in and manipulate ballots, fill them out for people, collect them, and basically manufacture votes by duping people, okay? And they believe it was happening in, a serious election down there. And this happens to be one of the country's largest Latino populations, and it also gets serviced by one of the largest civil rights groups, LULAC, okay? And they say Paxton is doing this to intimidate Latino voters weeks before the election. Now, one of the people who was targeted, and this is what kind of pissed me off, an 87-year-old great-grandmother. Now, again, she didn't get a phone call. She didn't ask to come in with counsel. This was a raid on her, okay? And she's been a volunteer to register new voters for 36 years. Lydia Martinez joins us now. It is nice to meet you, young lady. I'm sorry it is under these circumstances, but I'm glad to give you the platform.
Thank you.
So, Lydia, let's get the main part out of the way. Are you here to admit that you have been breaking the law for 36 years, if not recently? Ballot harvesting that warrants people knocking on your door?
This has been terrible. I'm not guilty of any of that. I'm an old woman, retired from 4 colleges. And all I do, I'm in LULAC. And after I retired, I found that the seniors, I'm also a commander with the American Legion. And I found a lot of the veterans that are on wheelchairs, and they cannot get out and vote. So all I do is take them the application to vote by mail, and I explain to them. They can write, and I explain to them exactly how to fill them out. It's a little confusing, and I go through the application, and I explain it to them. I leave it there, And it is entirely the responsibility to put a stamp on it and mail it. I leave. I never
tell them who to vote for?
see the ballot again. No, sir. I do this at this time. There's nobody running. Nobody's running. I just make sure that they have it ready.
So, explain to me what it was like.
And I go to the senior centers for them to come
Lydia,
here.
explain to me what it was like for them to come to your house. What happened?
I get up early to go water my plants outside. I have a lot of flowers. So I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, about 10 minutes to 6, and I wash my face, brush my teeth, and I take medication. I had just gotten out of the hospital the day before, on Monday the 19th, and I took my medication, and there was a knock on the door. The doorbell rang, and I thought it was my next door neighbor trying to borrow something. And in my nightgown, I went to the door thinking it's my neighbor, and they pushed the door, and 9 officers from the Department of the Attorney General rushed in and gave me a search warrant. And they came in and they told me to sit down where I'm sitting right here. And they told me they were gonna, 2 of them went into my bedroom and started searching, going through my bedroom. And I told them, I'm in my nightgown, let me get dressed. They told me no. They had 2 female and 7 men. They would not let me get dressed. And they set me here for 2 hours questioning me. It's the procedure of the mail ballot and exactly what I do. And dumb me, they never read me my Miranda rights. They never told me that I had the right not to answer. I was so nervous and shocked by this, I didn't think, because I know better. I know that I didn't have to answer, but I didn't think, so I started answering all their questions. And I explained to them exactly what I do. I go to the senior centers. I call bingo for the seniors, or loteria, whatever they desire. I take them cupcakes or a cake, and I call the bingo and loteria, and if they need an application to vote, they'll ask me. They know me. I've been doing this for a long time. And they'll tell me, Lydia, my voter registration is expired, and I will give it to them, and I leave it there. And I say goodbye, and I come home. And they
Lydia,
asked me
I'm very
if I
sorry that this happened.
Go back.
I'm sorry that this happened this way, Lydia. This story is just starting. We're gonna stay on it, and we're gonna stay on it until the truth comes out about what this is about and what proof they have and why they're doing this. I promise you that. So we'll talk again.
Thank you.
All right. Lydia Martinez, gracias y hasta próxima. I'll see you next time. Now, let's get some kind of perspective from someone who understands politics in Texas about what could make this okay. Dallas-based conservative radio talk show host, friend of show, Mark Davis. It's good to see you.
Hi, Chris.
Now, Mark, let me just be very clear. Mark Davis is not here to say, I love when 87-year-old ladies get door knocked at 6 o'clock in the morning. I understand that. You're a good man. I'm happy to have you on the show. This reeks, especially without the AG's office bringing out any proof to justify the process. What do you make of it?
Well, I'd like to have a heaping helping of the clairvoyance that you apparently have to know what reeks of politics and what doesn't, and you know I love you, who's innocent and who's guilty, because after on a show open, and I love tonight's show open, in which you talked about fair-mindedness and openness and all of that, where exactly has that been for the last 10 minutes that have dripped with the presumption that Paxton is a political hack in these last few minutes that have dripped with the presumption that she is absolutely innocent? I don't know. I have no idea. I know that AG Paxton's investigative team, that they have people on tape, sworn affidavits that they have folks on tape discussing illegal activities with regard to a legislative candidate named Cecilia Castellano. I have a crazy idea. Let's let these wheels turn and see who's guilty and who is not, rather than sitting here the days after the raid dripping empathy when we don't know who's innocent and who's guilty. Can I get an amen?
Listen, I'm fine with you. I'm fine with you. You get an amen. Would have been nice to hear that when the Mar-a-Lago search was done, but I get why you want it here, and I'm okay with that, but here's where I'm coming from. Let's see if you can smell what I'm cooking. One, when you know that people are scrutinizing you like this, you and I have been around this a long time. You know I do a lot of crime investigating. They put out their proof right away to shut people up. Has not happened here. A judge has reviewed the affidavits and also made a ruling that nothing can be looked at as the product of these raids yet, pending a hearing to justify the warrants in the first place. That's an unusual move because, as we both know, a search warrant only requires probable cause. It's a low standard, pretty easy to get a judge to sign one. So there is judicial pause here as well. That's why I'm skeptical.
I understand that. I think some of the skepticism comes from the fact that you don't like Paxton and you really love the grandma. I love the grandma, too. I love grandmas of all ages.
I don't know him. I love the grandma. I don't know Paxton. I don't have a feeling about him, but I love the grandma.
I understand. Well, I believe you do. When you say it reeks of politics, you pretend to know Ken Paxton, and you pretend to presume that his motivations are sinister. It's just obvious, Chris. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the flip side of that I know it's all up and up. I know it's all absolutely watertight. That's why we have a process. I mean, there's a 78-year-old granddad I can tell you about who's been tortured by the federal government. His name's Donald Trump. And they didn't exactly telegraph every single thing that made his indictments look watertight on day one either. That's not the way it always goes. Sometimes the wheels turn at the rate at which they turn. And no, I understand that, but with this search warrant, the process will turn, the process will play out, and we'll find out who's guilty of something and who's not. And again, my crazy idea is rather than jump in with presumptions of political ill will or these LULAC activists who presume it's like 1930s Germany, how about if we get the answers to some questions like, did anybody break the law? What an interesting answer that would be.
I got you. Oh, 100%. You're just not going to get one anytime soon, especially when you're trying to prove ballot harvesting this far out from an election when it would make no sense because there aren't any ballots out. But Mark Davis, you get an amen for me. I love
some of the harvesting. I know some of the harvesting. Some of the harvesting is from just a few weeks ago in the primary. Exactly. Understand? So what better? When's a good time to have this?
And there's an allegation.
Please tell us when a good time is.
Well, I would have done it during the balloting process for the actual election because, in truth, it's even farther back than that. 2023. They brought allegations of this, and they say they have proof.
Sometimes crimes happen.
I'm with you.
Crimes happen. Sometimes it takes a week, a month, a year. Sometimes it takes time, Chris. Dude, I love you.
Listen, I am with you, Mark Davis, and you are always welcome here to make the case and have the conversation. It's good to see you again.
I love you,
we'll stay on it. And you know what? I promise you, whenever we figure out what it is and there's some meat on the bone, I don't care how damning it is for the grandma and everybody else, we'll do another segment, you and me, and talk about where it led.
I'm here for it.
All right, take care. Right now, we're going to take a break, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Right now, the economy is, as usual, the number one issue with you, as it should be, right? Now we're starting to look at what has been said and how it works. I think Harris has got some issues with calling things price gouging, and what are you going to do to control it? Donald Trump is throwing a tax cut again. Now these plans are being looked at, and guess what? Trump's alma mater, the Wharton School, the University of Pennsylvania, says his plan is way more expensive. Why do they think that? And is it the right conclusion? Let's debate what's better. Next. You hear it all the time in Washington, especially from Republicans. Fiscal responsibility, cut spending, balance the budget, and it's always balderdash. Because when they have the power, they like to use the purse. And that's what we saw with Trump's first administration. You can like it, you cannot like it. But the tax cuts didn't pay for themselves and absolutely ballooned the debt and the deficit. What did you get in return? Well, that's part of the debate. So now here we are again. Harris talking about going after price gouging, talking about subsidies for housing, talking about a middle-class tax cut. Okay, Trump saying, no, I'm going to do the tax cut. I'm going to cut regulations. Wharton takes a look at it at the University of Pennsylvania. That's where former President Trump went to school. They say Trump would put the country in a nearly $6 trillion hole. Kamala Harris, $1 trillion hole. But to get there, Harris has to raise taxes while Trump promises to cut them. The how. The how is what makes it tricky. So, which is better? Let's discuss. Stephen Moore helped write Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and he's about to try to strangle me with my assessment of them. He also wrote the book called Trumponomics. Brian Tyler Cohen is an influencer, more than 2 billion YouTube views. Kind of makes me jealous. And the author of Shameless, Republicans' Deliberate Dysfunction in the Battle to Preserve Democracy. BTC, Stephen Moore, thank you both for being here. First, Stephen Moore, tell me why. Good to have you, brother. Stephen, tell us why those boobs at Wharton got it all wrong.
First of all, I wish I had 2 billion viewers on my YouTube. That's pretty impressive.
I know. It makes you jealous. Go ahead.
It does. It does make me jealous. Okay, so look, we don't have to look at some universities' models of what might happen if this, if Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins. We've had 4 years of Donald Trump in office, and we've had Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in office for almost 4 years, not quite. And what is the result of that? Well, if you look at, for example, incomes of the middle class, this is based on Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics data, the official data. Under Trump, the average family gained about $5,000 in income after inflation. That's a pretty good number. It was one of the best for a 4-year term. Under Biden and Kamala Harris, the average family has lost $2,000 in purchasing power. That is to say, the average family today is poorer today than they were when Biden came into office. Now, the other one thing you mentioned is...
All right, hold on. Stephen, one point at a time. Yeah. Brian, what do you make of the disparity argument that Stephen makes?
Look, the whole world was dealing with inflation, so it's not exactly fair to say that inflation is some factor that only impacted the United States when it impacted the entire world. And in fact, the U.S. has the strongest economy in the entire world under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris right now. So again, to point to this disparity as if it's some knock on what Biden and Harris have done during their time in office doesn't really make sense, and it shows us actually overperforming the entire rest of the world.
All right, quick bounce question to you, Brian, then back to Stephen.
Yeah, well, look, that doesn't answer the question.
Here's the bounce question. I'm going to indulge Stephen. Yeah. Give me a second. Give me a second to prove myself. Yeah. I'm going to indulge your curiosity.
Okay, good.
But Brian, the simple politics of it is, am I better off than I was 4 years ago?
Exactly.
Do you lose on that basis?
Right now, if you want to know whether not only whether families are better, but the entire United States is better, Donald Trump left office with net loss of 3 million jobs, with a 6.3% unemployment rate, with an economic contraction of 3.4%. Right now, we have 16 million jobs added. We have the strongest economy in the world, and we have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. So this idea that we're somehow not better off under Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, is a complete denial of reality. In fact, there hasn't even been a single Republican administration in my entire lifetime that's had a stronger economy than a Democratic administration. There hasn't been a single Republican administration in my lifetime that's had more jobs added than a Democratic administration. There hasn't been a single Republican administration in my lifetime that's had a lower unemployment rate than a Democratic administration.
All right.
So I don't know what Republicans are pushing here that is going to actually reflect well on them, but in over 30 years, Republicans have never proved themselves better stewards of the economy than Democrats.
Stephen, what are you pushing?
So before COVID hit, I remember in January, February of 2020, we had the best economy in our lifetime. And I remember thinking, if this continues, Trump was on a path to win a 40-state re-election and landslide, and then we had something called a pandemic. And we made one of the greatest mistakes in American history, where we shut down the entire economy. And so you're right. When you shut down every business in America, you lose 40 million jobs. You're right. And we should have never done that. But the point is that even when you take into account the pandemic, people's incomes were higher, and there was a bigger gain than there was under. And how is it that in a recovery in almost 4 years, how is it the average family is poorer today? And by the way, you don't have to ask me, Chris. Just go to the grocery store. Just ask people on Main Street. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And most of them answer that question. The 2/3 of them say, no, I'm worse off today.
All right, so Stephen, counter. Brian, sorry.
It's me. Okay. So it's interesting that you bring up the grocery store. So we had this whole issue of price gougers, and both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have said that they want to focus on these price gougers here. And so when Trump had the opportunity to take the price gougers to account because of high food prices, who did he blame? He blamed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in effect giving cover to the exact people who were actually gouging the prices. What did Kamala Harris do when she had her opportunity to say that she's going to bring prices down? She said that she's going to focus on the actual people gouging the prices. So I guess it's up to the American people who they're going to believe here in terms of bringing the prices down. Are you going to believe the politician, the guy who says that in response to price gouging, we're just going to blame the Democrats? Or are you going to believe the politician, Kamala Harris, who says that in response to price gouging, we're going to go after the price gougers themselves?
All right, I gave Stephen the first word. I'll give Brian the last word. I like this pairing very much. We're going to do this again. I don't want to give the audience too much to deal with on this. I appreciate you both. Well argued, and thank you. Stephen got the first word. Brian got the last word, just like a trial. We'll do it again. All right? And when we come back, I got a final thought about something that threads this whole show together, if you want to look at it as I do. Next. I am obsessed with better. It's almost epiphanic for me. We have to get away from the mud. It just makes us dirty. The metaphor is rock solid. Jim Jordan, my top, okay, what I talked about. Does it make things better? Yeah, because it gives you perspective that we are not the fringe. Social media is not reality. There is much more that we agree on than that which divides us. It's just being exaggerated for effect. Is Jim Jordan going after the judge's kid, making it better? No, I say, because he's not doing it with everywhere that we see that issue. That's the way to examine, with decency, not making an enemy of who you disagree with, trying to figure out how to get better. We'll be right back.